Okay, guys, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're running a little bit behind already, so got a lot to cover with Mario today. I just want to introduce Mario Schultzke and Paul Gladen. He's actually going to be introducing Mario to speak. Paul has some announcements to make about the Blackstone Launchpad, which you guys may have all heard of already. If not, it's new and exciting. It'll be great for if you're trying to start a business. As a matter of fact, I'm sure everyone in here is here because they want to start a business eventually. So I'm glad that all of you guys came. Mario is one of the experts in personal branding, and if you're trying to find a job or you're trying to start your own business, your personal brand is the #1 thing you can use to have a positive image. So
just don't ask me about plumbing.
Yeah, no plumbing.
No plumbing.
So I just want to kind of give just a brief overview real quick. This is part of a 3-part series that we have for personal branding. Next week will be with Karen Porter. She's going to have social media, and what we've learned from Mario tonight, we can actually take the knowledge with Karen next week. And the following week after that will be our mashup, where we can all work together to actually build our own personal brands. So you actually walk away with the knowledge and with something in your pocket. So without further ado, I want to introduce Paul.
So I'm Paul Gladen. I have 3 hats, I think. I'm co-founder of a business in town called MuseView Research, which does things for attorneys and CPAs. I'm co-founder of the Hellgate Venture Network, which some of you may have heard of, which is a entrepreneurial networking group here in town, which meets kind of once a month. But delighted to have any of you come along. You can look us up on Facebook. Facebook.com/HVNMT, or on LinkedIn. Just search for the Hellgate Venture Network group and request to join. And then my 3rd hat, which will be officially announced any day so now, is that I'll be the director of the Blackstone Launchpad here on campus. So the Blackstone Launchpad, I'll give you kind of just a very 30,000-foot view, a couple of upcoming things to make you aware of, and then I'll introduce Mario. But the Blackstone Launchpad, so you may have heard about it, but there's probably a lot of sort of general kind of confusion or lack of awareness exactly what it is. So the Launchpad is a program that was started at the University of Miami. Its mission is basically to help students recognize and pursue entrepreneurship as a viable career path. So you don't have to leave school and just go get a job working in a law firm or manufacturing business somewhere. You can start your own business. And the way the program works is if you want to be an entrepreneur and you have an idea, you register with the program, you submit what's called a venture assessment form, which asks you some questions about what your idea is. And then really at the Launchpad, our role is to help sort of facilitate you through the process of trying to become an entrepreneur. It's not our job to make your business idea successful. It may or may not be a good idea. It's not our job to tell you whether it's a good or bad idea. It's our job to help you learn to be an entrepreneur and develop the skills to do that by helping you think about kind of what the steps are, pointing you to resources, connecting you with other people in the business community, both sort of here in Missoula and kind of around the globe if necessary, that can help you with your idea. You can submit as many ideas as you like. You can come back to the Launchpad as many times as you like for as many meetings as you want. But that really is its philosophy, is to help you discover whether you have the entrepreneurial makeup and want to be an entrepreneur and want to pursue that. Whether you end up pursuing something through your time at the university or beyond, or maybe it comes to you kind of 10 years later, the right idea, but hopefully we've helped engender some entrepreneurial skills in you, which will also, I think, for anyone that decides to go through the program, I think are skills that will stand you in good stead even if you go get a job initially out of school anyway. So that at a headline level is kind of the Launchpad program, and clearly we'll be doing a lot more over the kind of coming kind of weeks and months to help you understand what that is, kind of introduce you to the program and start to get people involved. To that end, the opening ceremony is going to be next Thursday the 13th at the UC at 10 o'clock. I'm sure most of you know it's Charter Day, kind of the Celebrate Academics Day, but President Engstrom is making the opening of the Launchpad kind of the keynote really for that day. So there'll be an opening ceremony from about 10 till 10:30, where we'll have 2 or 3 speakers. But Thomas Curdy and I were just meeting with Joe Fungi. Thomas has been interviewing various entrepreneurs and other people around town and is working on some great video, which I think will really kind of capture the essence of the entrepreneurial sort of ecosystem that we already have going on here and inspire you for the future. And then we'll have an open house at the space, which you may have seen being kind of developed on the 2nd floor of the UC. They've taken a piece of space out of the far end of the bookstore, kind of overlooking the staircase, and that will be that's where I'm going to work and where we're going to kind of live. And people can come hang out there and talk to us about being entrepreneurs. So the final sort of announcement related to that is I'm going to be hiring 2 student workers to work with me. We may hire more down the road, but initially I'm looking for a couple of folks that can help me with really kind of the marketing. So how do we get the word across campus? So the program is open to students of any background, any stage of their kind of university career. It's open to students from Missoula College as well. So we need to get the word out and start to explain to people that entrepreneurship is something they can consider, which I think is going to be tremendous because it's going to mean we're going to have such a much more diverse set of people kind of bringing their ideas and collaborating. So, so folks that can help with that marketing effort, and we're going to arrange an ongoing kind of series of events that will kind of introduce you to entrepreneurs and get you the chance to kind of network with them. And Austin and I are going to sit down as well and kind of figure out how do we kind of tie together what the E-Club is, the Entrepreneurship Club is doing, kind of with what Launchpad is doing, because clearly we have very similar kind of goals and objectives to sort of raise awareness and raise kind of enthusiasm for entrepreneurship. So that job is up on the student employment site. I've sent Austin, I think, the link to it, so you're welcome to kind of push that out to everyone.
It's on the student job website, so if you go to umt.edu/jobs, there'll be a link to the left side. It says student jobs. You can go in there, and what's it listed under? The Blackstone helper?
It's really poorly labeled, kind of.
Actually an assistant, I think.
It's called like office assistant, and you have to kind of get into it to actually read where it mentions Blackstone. So if you can't track it down, ask Austin or kind of have him email me. I can give you my email address and I can point you towards it. It's actually, I think, a much more fun role than it reads, because a lot of the kind of the stuff got lost in translation when it got posted up. But it's a fun role to try and get the message out there and organize lots of kind of fun events to do entrepreneurial stuff. Or I'll give you my email address as well. You can feel free to email my business address. UZEVIEW.com.
Cool. Thank you. Are these my notes?
No, sorry.
Oh.
This is Mario. He said he needs no introduction. So he
Well, I just always find it awkward when people introduce, like, and you stand next to them, and it's just kind of weird. But it's funny that Austin just walked out, because I've got a great Austin story. Remind me to tell it when he comes back in. So I guess I have many roles. One of the roles is I'm the AVP of marketing here at the University of Montana. I also run a website called IdeaMenge. So sort of in my past life, I worked both in advertising, and I was very involved with entrepreneurship. Not last year, but the year before, I actually did a 48-state road trip. And I did an entrepreneurial event in every single of the lower 48 states. And it was just me and 3 other guys driving in a Honda Element across America for 4 months, literally doing 3 events a week across 3 different states. And, we'd couch surf. Actually, we stayed at Russ's house, so that was, thanks again, Russ. So that was like a very interesting experience. I spent the last 8 years before that working in advertising, so I ran digital strategy units for ad agencies up and down the West Coast. And I'll talk about personal branding today. And I don't know who wrote the description for my talk, but did it say something about like authentic or something like that? I think so. It didn't seem like the normal sort of personal branding talk, which is good. I'm not going to be talking about, hey, don't upload nude pictures of yourself on your Facebook profiles, because employers might see that. Because if that's why you're here, then you probably have other problems. So I don't want to get into that. Plus, I think it's pretty self-explanatory for you to not do that. And people are going to Google you, and you can do that yourself, and whatever you see, like you'll get an idea of what that first impression is. But if I think back, I was a graduate from this business school. I graduated here in 2002. I participated in the entrepreneurship and the business plan competition, took second, and just had a great experience here at the University of Montana. But when I got out, I didn't really have a brand. It was I was 21 years old. I didn't know what the heck I was doing in marketing, even though I studied marketing and I got good grades. But once you go out and you get into the real world, it's like, holy crap, this is the real deal, and I know nothing. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I think the first few years after college graduation, other than if you're like a doctor or you studied pharmacy or you're a lawyer, like it's going to be more learning. And it's really going to be the time when you start to develop your personal brand. And I don't know what everybody's definition here of a personal brand is. Like, does anybody have an idea? Like, what's a brand related to a person? Characteristics. Anything else? It's your identity. It's like what you stand for, right? And it's like, in a way, it's just like if people go, oh, hey, Mario, it's like that Mario guy, he is ... Like, that's your brand. And, your brand is not like when people, like what you tweet about or what kind of pictures you upload on Facebook. That all plays into your brand. That's probably like helps in like people like shaping their opinion about you. But ultimately, it's about like when I go, oh, Russ, he is ... So you need to think about what you want to come after that ... Right? Like what do you stand for? Caitlin, what do you stand for? Caitlin Copeland is ... What is it?
It's an economic development champion for Missoula.
I like that. Russ, what about you?
Evangelist for the state of Montana.
Evangelist for the state of Montana. Tommy?
Creator of killer content.
Creator of killer content. Ryan?
Has too many hobbies.
I have too many hobbies too. Plumbing isn't one of them anymore. But anyway, so it's like you ultimately need to stand for something, and you need to think about what you want that to be. And I'll tell you how I ran into my brand, and it is completely accidental. But when I graduated college, I got a job right away here in Missoula in an ad agency. Had a nice salary. I was like an account coordinator or something like that. And 3 months into that job, I recognized that I was learning absolutely nothing and that I was not advancing my career in any way or shape, so I quit. And I moved in. I bartered services with a startup where I think I did SEO for them, and in return, like I got a free place to stay, and it was pretty wild. But at the time, I was sitting there, it was right down by the river on the Clark Fork, and I was just sitting there, and I'm like, man, what do I do now? And I thought about becoming a personal trainer. I actually studied for the personal training exam, which I then failed. So I didn't become a personal trainer, which is probably a good thing. But at the time, it was 2002. I was like, and I was bored. I didn't have that much to do, so I started a blog. And I started this stupid website called the Mario Blog, which was in 2002. And in 2002, there weren't a whole lot of blogs. Like, it wasn't a topic that was very popular. There's no WordPress, no Typepad, no online services, none of that. And I just started blogging. And I didn't study design, I didn't study web development, but somehow I patched together like 2 or 3 different tools, and I just started blogging. So then I moved to Seattle. I become an intern, unpaid. I work in an ad agency called Wong Doody. It's not a joke. Irish guy, Pat Doody, Chinese creative director, Tracy Wong, and they put their names together, and it's Wong Doody. And I kid you not, the third partner's name, and this again is no joke, is Ben Weiner. So it's Ben Weiner, Tracy Wong, and Pat Doody. It's a very successful ad agency, but I worked for them for the next 3 years, and I actually worked in business development, which just meant that I got to go to all the bigwig meetings. And I worked for this old advertising guy who'd literally been around since like the 50s, and I would just like schlep his bag. Like we'd go and I'd be carrying the projector and I'd be carrying his bag, and I was flying all across America, going on these pitches and sitting in meetings with CEOs and chief marketing officers, and honestly, I was just sitting there learning. Like I spent the next 3 years just learning, and I delivered value because I never complained. I worked 75 hours a week with a smile on my face, and I was probably more tech savvy than sort of the average Wong Duty employee. So then fast forward 3 years. I win this stupid competition in Los Angeles, which is like put on by the American Association of Ad Agencies, and it's like you get all the most talented people. Every ad agency gets to send one person. You get put into teams and you pitch a real client. And my team won that competition, and I was sort of the key presenter. So I got all these job offers coming right after that. Like people were like, hey, do you want to come work for Chiat Day and RPA and Deutsch and all kinds of companies. But at the time I was really happy on Wong Duty. But one of the offers that came up was somebody asked me if I wanted to teach at the Academy of Art University, which is in San Francisco. I was 23 years old. Like I should not necessarily be teaching at a university level, much less graduate level. But I was like, okay, you know what, that sounds like a good idea. I think the University of Montana, when they saw the press release about that coming out, got kind of worried. And they were like, oh, he's getting involved with another university. We really need to figure out how to, involve him here at the University of Montana. Even though it was, to me, just kind of a fluke. But the next thing that happened, I was asked to be on the board of advisors here in the School of Business. So I come up, and at this point, I'm literally the youngest person by 20 years. And completely unqualified to be there, but I come up to my first meeting, and this guy walks up to me after the meeting, and he's like, hey, you want to come work for me in Portland? And I was like, I thought he was joking. It was Tim O'Leary, who is also a UM grad, who runs an ad agency called R2C Group, which is like a 400-person ad agency in Portland and San Francisco and Philadelphia. And I thought he was joking. I was like, yeah, well, let's talk about it. He's like, well, let's do dinner. And I'm like, well, I'm flying out tomorrow morning. He's like, going back to LA? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, well, I'll come down. And Tim he travels by private jet. So he takes his private jet, flies down to Santa Monica. We have dinner together. And 3 months later, I come up and I'm working in Portland as a director in an ad agency. Now here's what happened, and here's where it becomes relevant. So the first 6 months, again, I have no idea what I'm going to be doing. I think my title was like Director of Strategic Development or something like that. And we sit in a meeting with a client named Bosley, which, anybody here knows what Bosley is? They do hair restoration surgeries. They take the hair out of the back of your head, which never falls out, and they take all the follicles and they take them out and they put them in a little lab container and they implant them up top. It works. It's very painful. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But anyways, they were just doing television advertising, and we're sitting in this meeting, and I'm like, and the problem that we had was that we could do all these TV commercials, but people wanted to know more. People wanted to find out. It's like, okay, how does this actually work? You're gonna, and what am I going to look like 3 days after surgery? And what's going to happen to me? And is it going to hurt? Is it going to hurt 2 weeks later? Is it going to itch? Can I shower? So, and you can't put that in the TV commercial. You can't be talking about well, 3 days later after the surgery, your scalp might be itching, and by the way, you can't shower. So it's like, well, why don't we start a blog? And at this point, this is 2006 or whatever. In advertising, nobody had really done a blog. And and I was like, and part of the reason was that I got all this weird search engine traffic on my personal blog where I was like, this would make sense for a company to do. So we started a blog called battleagainstbald.com. I believe it's still up. And I took one of my creative directors and I brought him to Seattle. He wasn't, he had even less hair than I do now. And he went through the surgery. And I stood there with a camera and I'm not a camera guy, filming the entire surgery. I actually threw up in the surgery room. It was an 8-hour surgery, and it was brutal because they were literally cutting open his scalp in the back. So it was just like, oh my gosh. And then what we did is the next day, Seth started blogging about his journey of going through this hair restoration surgery. Anyways, it became like the blog of the month, and then like a bunch of different websites wrote about it. And all of a sudden, there used to be a TV show, I don't know, no, NBC or something like that, called The Big Idea, Donnie Deutsch. He actually is the guy who used to be very famous in advertising. And all of a sudden, we're on Donnie Deutsch talking about, you know, battle against bald. And blogging for business all of a sudden became a thing. And somehow, my personal brand, and then Adweek interviewed me about it, which is like the Advertising Industry Association, because I was like one of 3 people in the industry who ever had a blog. And all of a sudden, I was the blogging expert. I was the digital expert. I knew digital marketing. Mind you, I never studied digital marketing. I didn't really work in digital marketing. I just worked in advertising, and I had a blog. And at some point, those 2 things like came together, and it became my brand. But the thing I'll tell you is that I wasn't passionate about business development. So all the stuff I was doing in advertising beforehand, or the 4 Ps or the 5 Cs and all that stuff they teach you in marketing, I really could care less about. But blogging and creating content and doing those things online and storytelling, I was fascinated by. And all of a sudden, my personal, I don't want to call it a hobby, because I, like Ryan, probably too many hobbies, and my professional life merged. And it worked out really, really well for me. So like, but it was a very authentic process, right? And what was interesting is that the whole blogging thing, so what I'd been doing, I was like one of the first guys to have a blog. Not a very successful one, but I had a blog regardless. And people would come up to me and they'd be like, man, how did you do that? Or, you know, it's like, can you help me? So I probably set up, and I didn't know how to set up a blog at this point. I probably set up blogs for 50 people. And they were like, oftentimes they were clients. They were VPs of marketing. They were directors in ad agencies. They were, you know, they were directors, they were photographers. They're just all kinds of people that were like, hey, you know blogging, can you help me set up my blog? And so I set up 50 blogs, probably like for free. I don't think I ever charged anybody for it. And that just kind of helped with my brand, right? But when I go back to this idea of like, okay, a brand is like who you are, a brand is what you stand for, the first thing you need to have is a skill. Does that make sense? Like, you need to actually be good at something. You need to actually be able to do something that other people are not good at, or that other people can't do, or more importantly, that is actually in demand. Like, I'll give you an example of Tommy. Like, you learned, how did you learn how to do video content?
Just grab the camera and figure it out.
And how did you learn how to edit it?
YouTube.
You watch YouTube videos. And like now, like if anybody on campus came to me and said, hey, I need somebody to do a kick-ass video for Launchpad or this program or that program, like I'd refer them to you. But like that came about because you're probably passionate about storytelling, and you know, at some point you're like, I'm gonna get better at this. I'm gonna just start shooting some video, and you know, it's okay if I'm not great at it to begin with, and then I'm gonna learn how to edit it, and I'm gonna just, you know, you don't have to get a degree in something. Like, you watch YouTube videos, right? And now your brand is starting to form. And like, so now if I go around this room, like, I'd be able to sell Tommy no problem. Because I know a lot of people that want video work done, and I know that he would do a great job with it. So you need to think about, like when you think about your personal brand, it's like, what do you want to stand for? Like, what do you want to be good at? And you know, when you're first starting, I always say there's sort of 3 steps to a career. At first, you just know how to do, right? You start out your career, and like if you're a web designer, you become good at being a good web designer. If you work in, you know, environmental whatever, and you know, maybe you're good at identifying trees. That's probably a horrible example, but there's like, you know, there's something in your trade that you're becoming good at. So initially, you're good at the doing part. And then if you want to make like real money or be real successful, there's one or two skills, preferably both, that you need to add. At some point, you need to learn how to sell. No matter what it is that you're doing, if you can sell, you're going to be more successful. I don't like people who all they do is can sell, because it's not very authentic. And that's why I always tell people, at first, you need to learn how to do something. And then if it is your kind of personality where you're outgoing and you enjoy working with people, interacting with people, you can learn how to sell. So it's do, sell. Does anybody know what the third one is? Manage. Not everybody is good at managing people, but that can again be a skill that you acquire over time that is going to be really, really valuable. So if you're somebody who's really good at making videos and who's really good at selling their work, you're going to make a lot of money. You're going to be really well known. You're going to be really successful. You know, if you're really good at managing and doing, it's the same. You can have the same kind of trajectory. The problem is when you first come out of college, you're not going to be good at managing or selling. It's just not going to be a natural thing to you yet, to most people at least, right? So what you really need to think about is, what are you going to be good at doing? I don't know, any ideas? What do you want to be good at? Storytelling. Video?
Just telling stories.
Telling stories?
Cool. I just want to build cool things.
Build cool things. What about you, Jackson?
Still figuring it out. Computer programming.
Computer programming. Well, that's the kind of thing where, I mean, if you're good at computer programming, everybody wants to work with you. I mean, like, I was on your team, you know, startup weekend, and it's quite embarrassing because it's like me and Paul and all these other guys, and Jackson is like a junior in high school, senior, and like is more talented than all of us. And like if we all lined up and, you know, tried to get a job, you'd probably be the one getting it, you know, because you're a junior in high school who is really good at doing something that is in high demand. And to some people, that is programming. But that shouldn't be for everybody. Like, I don't enjoy programming. Like, yeah, I get that there's a lot of jobs out in programming, but there's also jobs in being a doctor, and I'm not going to be a doctor. I'm not going to be an engineer. So you kind of need to think about, like, what are you going to be really good at that you enjoy doing and that you want to do? And that's the foundation of your brand. And then you do that, and you just build something. The other thing, it's like, and I know I'm not allowed to, like, really say this on the behalf of your university, but resumes are kind of bullshit. Every resume looks the same. There's nothing on your resume that is going to jump out at me where I'm like, wow, we got to hire this person. They all look the same. And if you have, you know, you really have to be, like, resumes are for people who work in human resources. If you ever want to get a job or you ever want to get hired as a contractor, you do not want to be going through human resources. That's like the hard path, right? That's the path where it's like you got to follow all the rules, and there's these guidelines, and oh, I don't have 5 years of experience, so I don't qualify for that job. That's bullshit. Like that's not how it works anymore. Like, I don't care that Jackson is still in high school. If I need a computer programmer and Jackson is available and he lives in Missoula and he wants to work on the project, then that's who I want to work with. So the thing that's more important than having a great resume is to have a project. Is to actually build something. Is to do something that you can point me at, that I can look at and I can say, oh yeah, I get it. So when Russ says he's an evangelist for the state of Montana, anybody can say that, right? That can't be your brand other than if you back it up. So Russ backs it up. He has a website called Matter that he's had for 15 years, and he updates on a daily basis, and he does a ton of evangelism for the state of Montana and has for a very long time. So there's Russ's brand, evangelist for the state of Montana, and here's the project, the initiative that's actually backing it up. So think about, like, what are you going to be good at, and how are you going to prove it to me? And I don't want it to be a degree. I don't want it to be, job experience. I don't want it to be 3 years or that or 4 years or that. I want it to be a URL. Send me a link to something you built. And, send me a link to a video you made. Send me a link to Matter so you can prove to me that you're truly an evangelist, right? For Paul, you're an entrepreneur. Send me a link to your company. So as you guys go out there and you start thinking about building your brand, think about, A, what it is that you're passionate about and that you actually want to be doing. Again, do, manage, sell, and then build something. And just try it. And it's not going to be great when you first start. Your first video probably wasn't very great, right? But it's going to get better and better and better and better and better. And at some point, I'm going to say, like, oh, yeah, Tommy, he's about video. Jackson, he's a computer programmer, right? Like, your brand is going to start to take shape. So I'm going to give you guys two more pieces of advice. And you can completely disregard these. One of them is, when you talk about networking, and I very much dislike networking. I don't go to networking events. I don't necessarily enjoy meeting people. That's not how I built my brand. But when you think about networking, think about what you can give first. Because networking is this whole notion of like, hey, I'm going to go meet a stranger. I'm going to shake their hand. I'm going to give them my 20-second elevator pitch. They're really going to like me, and then they're going to help me find a job. Like, for some reason, that's what we think is networking, right? And that's what everybody tries to do, and it doesn't work. Like, it's like, yeah, people might be able to remember you, but think about networking from the perspective of like, okay, now you've got something you want to do. You're building a project, which is like, you're starting to prove it, and then do it for others. So, sorry, Tommy, I'm picking on you, but like, Tommy is doing a video for Launchpad, right? Like, I bet you if I ever call Paul or somebody calls Paul and says, hey, you know what, like, I need help with a video project, and Tommy helped Paul with his video, you're going to say, you know what, I know just the guy. And that's when you get paid, right? Or that's when you get paid big. It's not that first gig. It's not when you do these things for free to people, but it's when you go to that person, when that person gets asked and it says, hey, who did that video? Who built that website? Who did this? That's when you get paid. So start with a project, and then think about ways to give it away, to help others, to pay it forward. It's going to come back in leaps and bounds. I got Russ's son his first internship in college, and you know what? Like, at some point, there was a director at RPA whose blog I built, and it wasn't, for free. It took me like an hour. I'm not talking about I spent 40 hours on somebody's blog, but that person probably owed me a favor. And I don't think about it that way. It's like, oh, I'm going to do 50 things for people, and then if I call, they owe me a favor. But if you start helping people, and if you start taking whatever it is that you're passionate about and doing it and putting it out there, and then you pick up the phone and you need a favor, it's going to come back in droves. So the last point I'll make is like, so your brand is what you stand for. The next thing that kind of helps is like if people can remember you. And like when I first started in advertising, I was really poor. Like, I think I made like $30,000 living in Los Angeles, which I think my rent was $950 for a room, like in a really bad neighborhood. And I mean, it was bad. I didn't have a car. I was the only guy in Los Angeles who rode his bike to work. Like there was not many of us. And my boss at the time, because I'd go to these meetings and it's all these advertising guys like wearing expensive suits and like super expensive shirts and everything is custom tailored, and like when you first get out of college from the University of Montana, like you're not going to be able to quite rock the custom tailored suits. But my boss gave me this piece of advice. He says, like, have 5 nice shirts. They don't have to be great shirts. and like just wear a really goofy watch, or like wear a really nice watch. Like have something that people remember you by. And like that became my thing. So like I was wearing cheap shirts and like watches that were like kind of unique and interesting. And like people would like, you know, I was the watch guy. And like now I don't wear a watch anymore, but like if you had to like be like Mario, like whatever, he works at the University of Montana, like what would it be now?
Colored pants.
Colored pants. I wear goofy pants. I wear like really weird socks, right? Like people remember my socks, and it's probably combined with the fact that my pants are always too short too. So like, and that's okay, but that's not like what I stand for. Like people aren't just going to be like, oh, Mario, he wears like funny colored pants, but it's hopefully going to be like, oh, Mario, he's a really good marketer and he wears funny colored pants, or goofy socks, or like red shoes, or you know, I have a friend of mine who's he wears bow ties, you know, like, or he wear, you know, there's people who wear ties everywhere. So you can start like thinking about that, and that's also kind of your brand, right? It's like what people are going to remember you by a little bit, but it's not the foundation of your brand. Like the foundation of your brand is what you want to be good at. What are you going to build it on? And then all the other stuff, it's like little fun and games, like funny watches, funny socks, funny shirts, bow ties, whatever it might be, like that just helps people remember you a little bit. And then the last point I'll make, and then if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. It's like, don't be afraid to be yourself. When I remember when I graduated, like I was like in between these worlds where I was probably on my path to becoming someone who I didn't want to be, because I thought I sort of had to fit in with the corporate culture, at least when I worked here in Missoula. Everything, when you work for an ad agency called Wong Duty, like you can be whoever you want to be. But what's interesting is that I started blogging, and I'm not a writer. Like I'm not a good writer. I was a horrible writer back then, but you know, this was before Twitter. This was before Facebook. And like blogging, it's like you put it all out there, right? I mean, you know, if somebody wants to go back and read like how I felt when I was sitting in that house down by the river, right after I graduated college, and like all the fears and uncertainty, and like my girlfriend at the time. Don't write about your girlfriend, by the way, because like then if she's ever not your girlfriend anymore, like future girlfriends, like they like to go back in time, and it's not pretty. Like I once told a girl that this is all going on public television. Anyways, at some point, I helped like build a nightstand, like as part of like a bed, which I didn't remember. And then I told another girlfriend, a future girlfriend, who I'd bought a nightstand, that she was the first girl like to ever have a nightstand, and but she'd been reading my blog, and she's like, "You built a nightstand for another girl," and that was sort of true, but it wasn't really a nightstand. It was more like just like an attachment. But so don't write about your girlfriend. That oftentimes doesn't work out so well. But don't be afraid to be yourself. You know, even now, like I work at the University of Montana, and like everything is like so heavily scrutinized, and you know, I'm sure there's like all kinds of room for attack, like on who I am as a person. Oh, he wears green pants, he doesn't take his job serious, or you know, he's on Twitter, or you know, it's like, but that's okay, because like if ultimately like the person who I am is not accepted in the role that I'm in, then that's not the role that I'm going to have in the long term. So like as you develop your own brand, and you, whatever it is, you start wearing, you know, goofy shoes or bow ties, like don't be afraid. It's okay. You know, it's like I guess I'm technically an administrator at this university, and I don't really dress like an administrator, and I don't really want to. And it's okay, because I think it just makes your brand stronger. Like it makes you more memorable, and like most importantly, like I would actually like you, you know, because you're not just trying to be someone you're not. So anyways, Austin, I don't know if this is kind of what you wanted me to talk about, but if you guys now I'm going to give you the funny Austin story now that you're back in here. Is that your mom?
Yeah.
Oh, nice to meet you. So, so Austin and I work out at CrossFit on the West Side, and but like I had never met Austin, but somehow he had heard that like I worked at the university. And he's like, "Oh, you work at the university? What do you do?" And I'm like, "Oh, I work in marketing." And he's like, "Oh," he's like, "Man, it's like, what were they thinking with that Thrive campaign?" And with the Thrive campaign, like the rebrand, and he was just like, I just don't know. That seems like a really bad idea. And he's like, "You work on that?" I'm like, "Yeah, I kind of did that." And then he's like, "Oh, I'm looking for a job." But I'm just kidding. I obviously like Austin, and that's why I'm here today. But you're somebody who's very good at like going out and like standing for someone, for something, and like approaching people and talking to people, and ultimately being an advocate for this group. So anyways, that's my Austin story, which I thought was pretty awesome. Any questions for me? Somebody's got to have a question.
Thanks, Paul. So you sort of suggested your brand didn't really occur until you had that kind of Bosley blog going. So does it take someone a certain point in time or a certain set of events for sort of a brand to emerge? And then there's a sort of follow-up question which you may want to talk about. Can you kind of change your brand? Does your brand change if you're sort of passionate about it?
Yeah.
How long does it take to develop a brand, and can you change it?
I think it kind of like once you get good at something, no matter how it is, that like then it starts forming to be your brand, and then you need to put it out there, right? You need to let it breathe. You need to let people in and see that you can build blogs, see that you can do different things. So I think it probably happens like as you develop expertise and as you actually legitimately get good at something and know something. And for me, that was a few years out of college. That doesn't mean that that's how long it takes. You can probably learn a lot faster. Like the fact that Jackson is in high school and can program. When I was in high school, I didn't really have any skills that in any way or shape would get me a job. So I don't think it's like it's going to take 3 years and it's going to be the 3 years out of college. I think you can acquire these skills in college, and I sort of wish that I had done more of that. In terms of like your brand morphing, now at this point I'm probably not known for blogging anymore, but like at some point when I worked in advertising, I kind of got bored with it a little bit, and I just felt like I wasn't making an impact. And the people I was really obsessed with were all entrepreneurs. Like those were the people that I wanted to talk to. Those were the people that like I got excited about. And I was like, gosh, those, like I work with all these interesting people in advertising, and we're doing all this meaningless work. And ultimately, it's all out of our control because the chief marketing officer or the CEO is going to make the decision. And if they don't like the work we did, then it'll never air, right? It was like, it's a very unconducive environment for an artist. So what happened is like I started this blog on the side called Idea Match. And my idea was just like, I want to interact with more entrepreneurs, like because I like entrepreneurs and I like the energy and I like ideas and I like talking about ideas and I like ideas that actually happen, which in advertising, most ideas never happen. So I started this website called Idea Match. And I was like, I'm going to interview entrepreneurs. And just because I want to learn from entrepreneurs, so I started, and I probably interviewed like 10 entrepreneurs. You were one of my first 10 interviews. You must have been. I interviewed like all the people I knew that were entrepreneurs, which was probably only 10. And then, they each told one more person, so I got like 3 more interviews, and then I was done. And I was like, okay, I've now interviewed every entrepreneur I know. Like, I guess I can shut down Idea Match. So one night, I come home and I had a few too many like glasses of wine or beers or something like that. I was living in Portland at the time, and I'm obsessed with Seth Godin. Like I don't know if anybody's ever read a Seth Godin book, but like he's a great author about marketing. And I was like, okay, as I'm about to go to bed, I'm like, I should interview Seth Godin. And like I would have never just emailed Seth Godin, except I was in an altered state of mind. So I emailed Seth Godin. And I write, like, it's like I have a huge man crush on you and blah, blah, blah. And like, I'd love to interview you. And like, I'm sorry, like, you know, I have only got a few people on this side, but like, and then I woke up the next morning and I'm like, oh crap, what did I do? So I checked my email to pretty much send Seth Godin like an apology email, which I didn't think he was gonna like read my email or anything like that. Not only had he read my email, he had gone on IdeaMensch, he had downloaded the questions, and he had sent them back to me. So like all of a sudden, I had interviewed Mario Schultzke, Russ Fletcher, and Seth Godin. And that was the beginning of IdeaMensch. That's when I was like, and then every other email I ever sent out to anybody was like, hey, we've interviewed people like Seth Godin, right? Like, and you know, at this point, I've interviewed over 1,600 people on IdeaMensch. And if you think about like my brand, you know, depending on where you go, like a lot of people would probably like mostly know me for IdeaMensch. But, you know, and that's why I'm involved with entrepreneurship, even though I'm not really an entrepreneur, but it's something I'm passionate about, and it's something I've sort of built a brand in. It's something I really care about. And, but again, if you think about it, I interview entrepreneurs, and the idea for me with IdeaMensch at this point is I want to interview famous entrepreneurs that we can all learn from. Like, that's one part, but that's a small part. Like, the thing that's more important to me is I want to give entrepreneurs their first piece of publicity, right? I want to take somebody who maybe is not a successful entrepreneur yet, who's just getting started, and I want to help ignite their idea. And I want to put them on the homepage of IdeaMensch. I ask everybody the same 15 questions, and you know, at this point, that's been the most gratifying part of that journey. But again, it's like giving something, right? It's like about like helping an ecosystem, and my brand has probably like evolved around that. And I'll give you one more example. Russ was an interesting guy to stay with, the most interesting guy we stayed with. And we just go into these cities, and people would hear that we were coming, and like people would be like, hey, you can crash at my place, or you know, I know this venue, and you should talk to these people, and this would be a great guy to speak. And one of the guys who reached out to me was a guy named Carl Blake. And we had an event in Des Moines, which is in Iowa, and like 3 hours away from Iowa, I think in like southern Iowa, Carl Blake lives. But he's adamant that like we stay with him. And I'm like, okay. And then we do a little bit of research, and like, so Carl Blake is a pig farmer who is breeding this new kind of pig. Carl Blake was an Apple engineer who at some point decided it was a good time to get out of technology and into pig farming. So he bought a pig farm, and he did like the mass production pigs, which he was like, wow, this is a broken system. These pigs don't taste good, and I don't like the condition that they're raised in. I'm going to make the best tasting pig in the world. So he researched that. He went online, and he bred a Chinese Misha pig, which is, they look like those ugly Chinese dogs, with a Russian wild boar. And it's called a Swabian Hall, which the last Kaiser of Germany, that was his favorite pig. The Germans have this pig, but it's never gone outside of Germany. They would never sell breed stock off this pig. Well, he recreated it in the US, and it is the best tasting pig. So a pound of pig, you get like $1 for, or 90 cents. Carl Blake, like he gets $3 for his pig. But anyways, we stay with Carl Blake on the pig farm for 5 days. It's a mess. If you Google Carl Blake and you see like a big guy with overalls and a beard and long hair, that's Carl. So we feature Carl. He speaks at the event. We write an article about it. Next thing you know, the Des Moines Register writes an article about Carl Blake. Next thing you know, the New York Times writes an article about Carl Blake. Next thing you know, Andrew whatever bizarre food brings Carl Blake on his show. Next thing you know, Carl Blake is on the Colbert Report. And you know, we kind of helped start that. And we don't take credit for it because it's all about like, you know, Carl's pigs and the work that he did, and he's just an interesting guy. But like, I got to play like a small role in that. You know, it's a very small role, but that's so gratifying to me. And so anyways, at this point, my brand probably has morphed. And I think that's okay, and I think that's going to happen over and over. Any other questions?
What if you have too many dues? How do you, like I said earlier, you have too many hobbies. And I mean, quite a few of them are tangible hobbies. They turn into something better. Where do you, I mean, how do you hone your passion to one thing and stop getting distracted by other projects that you started?
You know, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing either, because you're probably exploring right now. Like right now, you're probably doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I think that's okay. I think at some point it'll sort of organically evolve. You know, at some point you're going to get out, Ryan, and you're gonna have to get paid, and at that point you might have 5 sort of okay hobbies, right, that are all productive, not like playing racquetball, but one of them might be the one that somebody's willing to pay you for, and so that might just happen, right? I think when you're in college, like, explore, get good at many things, but when you get out, like, I'd love for you to think, like, have more than just a resume that says you went to the University of Montana and you had 3 internships, right? Even though that's important, but I'd love for you to be able to actually say, like, you know what, and I'm really good at this. And not necessarily just say that, but show it. Send me the link. So when you say, hey, you know what, I know web design, I know HTML, like, send me a link, right? Better yet, maybe I find out about you before you ever email me because of what you built. Do you ever?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, how important do you think it is to leave and come back here from a state like Montana? Or do you think we are losing any sort of edge if we don't live somewhere else and then come back?
No.
Do you think it's...
No, I think you can stay. You know, for me, I didn't, you know, when I graduated here, I didn't have a skill. And I felt like I kind of needed to go and get that, and it was good. You know, when you work in big cities on big brands, you get a certain perspective that probably would have just taken me longer to acquire here. But you know what? If I didn't have the option because of my work permit, but if I'd stayed here and I'd like tried to, you know, we had a business that we started in college, and if we had spent the next 2 years trying to make that happen, I don't know, maybe I'd be further along now. So I don't think you have to leave, but you have to push yourself. Like, don't just like work a retail job and think that at some point you're going to be really successful. Like, work a retail job. Like, I cleaned toilets when I was here at the university. That's okay, but like, get good at something, right? Like, be passionate about something. Like, make something happen, build something.
Well, I mean, as an example, when you are with a professor or with your first job, ask questions. What's a big problem you've got? What's a pain you have that isn't being addressed? He mentioned my son. He got him a great internship at one of the ad agencies. They wanted to hire him then. He was a sophomore. He did get a job after he graduated because there were no jobs. He was assistant to the senior vice president or something, you know. And he just got frustrated. He said, what's the problem? Is there a problem you've got that you can't answer? Is there something I can do? And she said, well, we bought this piece of software, and nobody knows how to use it. He was a political science and French major. So he sat down with this piece of software and taught himself how to use it. Other than long duty, he's now worked for all the ad agencies that Mario has mentioned, because they keep recruiting him. Because he became a specialist in a specific area and became very, very good at it, because he asked a question.
Yeah. That's cool.
You asked a question already.
Any other questions?
I think in my experience, I left Montana in '97. And so your question you asked is kind of a tough one, but I feel like in today's age, and kind of what we're trying to do with like the E-Club and what I'm trying to do with some businesses is try to mash minds together. With the Blackstone Launchpad, we're trying to get like students to start putting their ideas together, like you and me or somebody, and just start mashing ideas up and network and be willing to just, you know, try new things or whatever. And so we're in the day and age now where I came back to Missoula now because, and my background is music production and, you know, creative content, but it's because the internet allows us to do more things. And so I figured, okay, you know, Missoula's a cool spot, but it's also a testing ground for me. Can I be successful in a small market versus Los Angeles where I ventured to pursue music or whatever. But I think maybe in short, it's you know, if I look back as an undergrad or whatever in my early days, is to go out there and match minds with people. So that's kind of what we're trying to get towards.
Does anybody know the Cycling House? Anybody heard of that? So it's a local company. I sit on their board of directors, and it was started by a grad, Owen Yu, and he was a cyclist, right? He was a business major who loved to cycle. And what the Cycling House does, and it's $1 million plus a year, very successful company right here in Missoula, Montana. He organizes training camps for cyclists. So he rents a house, you know, in Montana, in Arizona, and people come from across the world to train at this house for a week. And it's like 5 or 6 cyclists. You ride 60, 70 miles a day. You know, you're fed. You get to like hang out. You get to network. It's like a 1-week training camp that is sort of like what professional cyclists would do for non-professional cyclists. And it's fascinating. And now at this point, he also built an e-commerce store alongside with that, which is a very successful e-commerce store as well. But that's a guy who never left. But the thing that Owen did is he took his passion and he built something, right? So, and it was probably the first 2 or 3 years, he probably didn't make a whole lot of money, right? Like he probably wasn't very successful. He probably just got by. But at this point, it's successful, and it's right here, and he never left. And so I don't think you have to leave as long as you're willing to iterate, right? As long as you're willing to continue to grow and build things and do things that make you kind of uncomfortable and that push you. And, you know, I know a lot of people live in LA, and, you know, Kimball is the exception, but, you know, they just go, like, through the motions. Like, they just, you know, they drive to work, it's an hour and a half, or it's an hour, they go to work, they come home. Even though they make $80,000, $90,000 a year, they still live month to month because their rent is $2,800 a month. You know, it's like, and that's not like, you're not necessarily like, you're not going to get any better doing that than you could right here in Missoula, Montana, working a retail job or working whatever during the day, and then going home at night, building something that you really care about, that you're really passionate about, that'll ultimately be like what you'll be known for. Cool. Well, thank you for having me, and like this is awesome. I'll definitely come to your next meeting, and if anybody, my email address is just mario@ideamensch.com. If you're an entrepreneur, if you know entrepreneurs, I'd love to help. So thank you.